All right, this is going to be fun, but first I just got to say, what do you think of that talk? Some of you people accuse me of being depressing. How do you feel now? I'm here to cheer you up now. I gotta take a turn here and maybe lighten up the mood a little bit. Kenneth, it's very nice to meet you.
Thank you, you too.
Jayant asked me to interview you months ago. I, of course, agreed. I'm happy to do anything at this conference. I didn't know who you were, so I, of course, did my homework. And it didn't take long for me to realize, oh, I do know who you are, and actually I've been a fan for a very long time. This is the book, and this is funny. I moved to the United States in 1995. It wasn't very long until one of my friends introduced me to libertarianism. I started immersing myself in revolutionary history, and then at some point I became aware of a writer by the name of Boston Tea Party. And so I'm reading the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, books like this, You and the Police, and I'm this Canadian thinking, this is a wild place. Like these Americans have pretty interesting ideas. And so this book, there was another book about privacy I enjoyed.
Bulletproof privacy.
Yeah, enjoyed that one. And then I sort of took a break, and I've gone back and looked at all the books you've written since. And the titles, they kind of form like a commentary on the way society has progressed, because you're writing books to help people. And so I see there's a book about dealing with the police, there's a book about our privacy, there's a book about guns. And I think that this is a commentary on society, but also maybe part of your personal journey.
Certainly.
Yeah, so I think, back in, so this was, I think, 1996, we definitely had issues with police brutality, intrusions.
You had Waco, you had Ruby Ridge.
Exactly, that was a very big thing then. We've had constant discussion about gun rights, Second Amendment issues. You wrote your book before Edward Snowden, but privacy has just blown up. And then you started talking about men's issues, and with a book called Modules for Men, Manlyhood.
Right, it's a 3-volume series. And
okay.
There's some on the table.
So I'm wondering, what did you see at that point that you thought you needed to tackle that topic? Because prior to that, I could see sort of where you were and what was going on in society and why these topics were of issue. Why did you think it was important to address manlyhood at that time with a 3-volume book?
Well, I became more increasingly aware of a lack of manliness and masculine responsibility. What I've seen happen in the West, in the USA, is the feminization of men and the masculinization of women. And where you're going to end up with those two types of creatures are a lack of testosterone on either side. You're not going to have, butchy, women who can fight the next civil war. And you're certainly not going to have men with enough testosterone left. So in that connection, the loss of masculinity alarmed me for our political and cultural future. And within that, I became more aware of there are things that men have a responsibility to do. I believe in a division of labor, so to speak, a division of social and cultural duties that has worked for many societies, most societies, for 5,000 or 6,000 years, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I wanted to explore that not only for myself, because I'm not a perfect man. I don't know of a perfect man. They crucified him 2,000 years ago. I don't know of one since. So we've all got a lot to learn as men. So I wanted to explore what that is, and some of this is cross referential to women as well, things of honor, or running your house well, how to plan your future, and so forth. But mostly it's for men, young men who've not had rites of passage, who do not have a male mentoring village, whether it's an older brother or father, a good stepfather, a grandfather, an uncle. And the young men are lost today. And that's why they're such prey of a charlatan like the Tate brothers. They're looking for a leader, and they're going to find one. That's why you see gangs form in cities, because young lost men are looking for leaders, and they're going to find leaders. It's just not going to be the best example. So I went from issues like privacy, guns, the Constitution, things like that, to a more inner search for how can we improve the country and improve our citizenry. And quite frankly, a lot of it is up to men, and we failed in my lifetime. So I'm trying to understand that and help do something about it.
If you look at the topics, the first three, so guns, police intrusions, privacy, two of them, so police violence and the issue of privacy, those have universal appeal. So these are neither left nor right, I think. I mean, people on both sides. But your appeal seems to be primarily coming from the right. Am I correct?
I'd say so, sure.
Why do you think that is? Because privacy is something that everyone is interested in. Police brutality is something that everyone is against.
Yeah, you think it's also a liberal issue?
It's very liberal. These are very liberal issues. Right. Why do you think your appeal comes from the right?
Well, I came into the libertarian room from sort of the Republican side. There are many doors into libertarianism or anarcho-capitalism. So my parents were Republican, and I was born in that political culture, and it made a lot of sense to me. It still kind of does. So I came into it from that direction. So the sense of it, still is fragrant, amongst my writing. And if it appeals to, the right side, of libertarian folks, I'm not at all surprised. What's been astonishing is the militarization of the left and how they're cheering the police and excessive police power when it suits their purposes. So, the anti-police hippies of the 60s, you don't see them anymore, the left. You see the left, especially with the Biden administration.
I'm not seeing that, though. What about Black Lives Matter and
Yeah, when you have a racial component, because that is more important to them. But they don't mind using the police when it serves their purposes.
The reason I'm asking is because, one of the things that just came up with Jonathan's talk is he was talking about divisions.
Right.
And it's strange to me that we can't unite over stuff like this.
You can't do that.
We can't unite the country.
Right.
You know what I mean? How would you write this book differently if it was for a left-wing audience? It's the same issue. It seems like once you introduce race into it or something like that, it becomes divisive.
Yeah. Well, as soon as the left gets, burglarized or assaulted, they're the first ones. I mean, look at Antifa. When, a riot happens or, some street fighting happens, they're the first ones to scream for the police, the Antifa. So when they want the cops for themselves, they don't mind.
Okay.
How would I write it differently for the left? I don't know.
Because it's really important. Because what Jonathan's saying is it's a real possibility, right? If this bridge is not gapped.
Yeah, certainly. 20 years ago, I wrote a novel all about the velvet divorce within the U.S. and people moving to Wyoming in the West in order to be freer than where they were in California, Connecticut, etc. And it becomes almost a civil war at the end of the book, and that was 20 years ago. What I've seen since then is just accelerating towards that. And when Jonathan mentioned the state of Texas ignoring the Supreme Court's decree to take down the razor wire, that's called nullification, which we saw in the 1860s right before the Civil War. And that was actually advocated by Madison and Jefferson in the late 1700s as a way for the states to have the feds back off. So we're seeing nullification come around again. I think it's a precursor to a Civil War environment, you know.
Okay, what did you think about Jonathan's talk, the possibility of it? Do you think that this is something that
it's almost certain, and I thought that 20 years ago. Whether or not it's going to be a shooting war, that's a variable, but certainly the states trying to push back the feds in a nonviolent way, you know, through nullification. Just
okay.
As Stalin said, you know, how many divisions has the Pope, right? How many divisions has the Supreme Court?
But are you saying within the rule of law? Because that's just reform, right? That's not what he was pointing at.
Who? Stalin?
No, John. Common mistake. Jonathan. We're talking about shooting. You're saying it's not going to be shooting war. If it's just reform, then that's not a war at all, right?
Well, at some point, when you have, quote, reform, whether it's Abbott in Texas ignoring the Supreme Court's, you know, decree, then the ball is back in the federal court. It's like, are we going to really enforce, you know, Texas to take down, are we going to send troops to take down the barbed wire that the Supreme Court said must be taken down? So the ball's in the feds' courts. And ironically, this happened first with the wave of legalization of marijuana in the states. I mean, that was, you know, pot was a criminalized drug. And the feds backed off on that. I think they realized that they didn't have popular support anymore. And so that was a form of nullification in a way. And maybe this can keep going where the feds continue to retreat and retreat without pushing the issue militarily or with police power. We'll see. But as far as the country in a velvet divorce, I think we've been at least 2 different countries for half my lifetime. And at some point, I think we'll just have to recognize that, and you know, maybe it can split apart cleanly as Czechoslovakia did. And that's where the term velvet divorce came from. But I doubt it. I really doubt it. I think we have a lot of fissures in this country, race, economic, culture, that are just going to break cleanly apart. I think it'll be pretty tragic. I think it'll be pretty tragic.
Right. I mean, there's a precedent for that not happening cleanly. Resistance to that. Okay. I want to take questions about your talk today on conspiracies. So if anyone has a question, you can raise your hand. Giant will help with the microphone. I have a question for you. Oh, this is your microphone? Oh, so it's either me or them, huh?
We can share that.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. I was thinking about your talk today about the conspiracies and how people sort of become dedicated to these ideas. They become married to them, and that's very dangerous, right? So I did a talk yesterday that hit on some of the same themes.
I'm sorry I missed it.
No, it was fine. They gave me plenty of trouble without you. But I hit on the same thing, and that is that people get so attached to an idea that they no longer can assimilate new information, even if it's factual.
Right.
Do you see that, and what are your thoughts on how you break through that?
I guess the trick is not to become so emotionally invested in your idea, and always be open to the fact that it may need revision or even chucking out. The attitude, I may be wrong, but I'm not mistaken, can get you into trouble, especially over the decades. They've done research on why people believe conspiracy theories, and what they found generally in common with the adherents is that conspiracy theorists feel powerless in life. They feel the victim or under the thumb or the boot heel of something greater than them, and they can't do much about it, but they want to understand it, and they don't want to be surprised by the next go-around of that kind of oppression. So they're apparently looking for the next round of this and jumping to conclusions, and they've formed a bias and a confirmation bias towards it, and it seems to comfort them that if they can't do anything about it, at least they understand that COVID was a hoax, or chemtrails are killing us or whatever comforts them, even if the knowledge is actually ineffectual to stopping these things. But somehow it's a psychological comfort.
Okay, so what you're saying is that they don't want to be free of this illusion?
The illusion gives them some utility.
Yeah, okay. We got a question there?
Kenneth, it's me again, you see.
It's me again too.
Yeah. Jonathan made absolutely excellent speech. And it was really scary. I'm absolutely happy about this. I would like to give optimistic information regarding his story. Many Russian people in Russia believe that Putin, President Putin, actually American spy. American spies for Russian, for Americans it's CIA spy or Klaus Schwab spy. Do you believe this information optimistic or pessimistic? If it's clear.
Do I believe it's America's fight?
Optimistic or pessimistic, if it's correct.
I'm sorry, I still don't understand the question. Am I optimistic or pessimistic about what?
I think some people have. Question is, if this information correct, if, is it will be optimistic for America or pessimistic?
Oh, okay. I don't know. I've not studied the entire Russian-Ukrainian beef over the years. For me, it's a rabbit hole. I wish we weren't involved. I really don't know. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Hi. In Canada, the burning of churches, the unproven graves of the Catholic schools, the removal of Bibles from schools itself in Europe, the migration of Muslims in a lot of European Western countries. In England, they're buying up Christian churches, taking down crosses, paving over historical graves. I think they're putting 6,000 mosques in Europe right now. Conspiracy theory. Is there a war in Christianity, and is there a spiritual battle going on?
I certainly believe that. Part of the component of being a Christian is believing in spiritual dimensions. And the battle between so-called good and evil is a personal one. It's a satanic battle against the Creator, according to the Christian understanding. So a lot of the evil in this world doesn't necessarily surprise a Christian. In fact, we generally expect it. Evil is, in our view, is not just some accretion of bad acting. We believe there's an actual plotting personality behind evil that's based on hatred, quite frankly. And the interesting thing about evil is that it's so boring. It's the same everywhere. Evil's not an interesting person. Satan's not an interesting person. And that's why evil is so historically similar. So yeah, I'm not at all surprised with Europe turning into a post-Christian continent. And in fact, that makes a lot of sense, plugging that in, the Muslimification of Europe. By 2050 or so, they'll own Western Europe. And that makes sense in the book of Revelation, where the old Roman kingdoms descend upon Israel. I used to wonder why would futuristic Europe care about conquering Israel. Now it kind of makes some sense. So in that sense, yeah, I think that's what's going on in a spiritual sense.
With regard to what's going on in Russia, I always say, well, it doesn't matter if Putin dies, they'll just put up another sociopath. But this seems to be a phenomena in most places, though. Do you think we'll ever get to a place where people actually want to have good leaders instead of having sociopaths? Because I don't see any evidence that they want to have, and good leadership can be very valuable and very powerful, but and democracy hasn't solved this problem. So how do we get to a system where we actually have real leaders in positions of authority?
Yeah, you'd think that it would make sense that we would demand ethical, competent people over generations running political spheres, but that's not been the case. The United States probably is the best example of it temporarily working for about 120 years, and then it went off the rails towards the end of the 19th century. Are we as human beings really desirous of all that's good and true and pure? Maybe not. All of us have ugliness and selfishness and things that we don't like about ourselves, and that's part of the human condition. The Christian would say that we're naturally geared toward or desiring of sin, and we're constantly having to fight that, whether it's through philosophy or religion or just better personal behavior. So I don't think we're ever going to kick that. And so therefore, I think the sociopaths and the psychopaths will have a pretty good chance of keeping in their spheres because they're all about the power. I think as Winston Churchill said, a lie is halfway around the world before truth is even putting on its boots. Truth is always reactive to a lie or to oppression. So I don't think we're capable of creating our own heaven on earth or nirvana or paradise. I think we'll continue to flub it up, maybe learn something along the way, but human history is very cyclical. And we build great institutions and sometimes great belief systems, but things go south pretty reliably. And I think that's on us as human beings.
A multiple part question. Do you believe the American public was purposefully misled about the efficacy and the adverse effects of COVID vaccines? That's part one. And part two, what percentage of this audience do you think feels the same way or what way they feel if they were misled?
I believe that the risks within the very minimal trials of the mRNA COVID vaccines, those risks were almost completely shoved under the carpet and minimized in the reported data. Especially with women, pregnant women, fertility issues and so forth. This is all coming out by people, including microbiologists, who were sort of on the mRNA vaccine side from the beginning, and now some of them are starting to say, we've been had. This was wrong. What percentage of the audience feels that way? I don't know. How about a show of hands? Do you feel that the COVID vaccine was more dangerous than originally told to us in 2020? So a little more than half the room, and that's probably a good representation of the United States and certainly of some countries in Europe. So that leads us to be a little more suspicious the next time a pandemic comes around with its magic cure with no testing.
It's not really a vaccine, it's gene therapy.
It is gene therapy. Right? Completely true. And we have reverse transcriptase. I mean, that RNA does affect the DNA. They're now admitting and so forth, and it doesn't leave your body. And, it was way too much to risk too soon, too much. And I think a lot of people will pay for it.
Okay, we're getting low on time here, so I got one more question for you, though. I'd like to know what your thoughts are on sort of the state's capture of media, both traditional and modern, mainstream and alternative, corporate and freelance, just the media's, the state's capture of the media, what that means. And also wondering if one day you could write a book called You and the Media, because I love the way you write, you do great research, you speak to the people, and that's something that I think people need to know about. They don't.
Well, the historical capture of the media before we had social media, that took a long time. John Taylor Gatto probably got into that sufficiently for most people's interest in the subject. I'm sure there are other books on that. What's been the game changer is, as Rick Rule mentioned, with social media. It's decentralized, it's not controlled, versus getting a letter to the editor printed in the newspaper. That was tough to do if the newspaper didn't like your point of view. Now anyone can say anything, but now what's also coming out is government pressure behind the scenes on Facebook and Twitter and so forth to suppress or minimize or shadow ban certain unpopular things. So the state is at it again.
And boost the narrative too, so
Exactly.
both ways.
Right. Yeah, what do we do about that is, well, as Rick said, you form everything into a question, a very polite question, and you beat the algorithms. And I've noticed that on my own Twitter account. It does help. So
Yeah.
all of us have to get involved and keep speaking up a little bit where we can, and perhaps the weight of all these grains of sand, can shift the balance
Yeah.
somewhere.
I got a confession to make, actually. Rick, in his talk, he alluded to some of the problems he had online. And I have to admit, I was like the fifth column working for the opposition, behind the scenes, deleting his posts and keeping him away from Twitter and doing all those things to protect Rick, me, his colleagues, his employer, his friends, his loved ones, because I knew what would happen if he got on Twitter and saw something, he would just go crazy. So it was me. I was behind the scenes keeping him off the internet this long. But
it was well worth the
yeah.
round robin here.
Yeah. And now he's loose though, so look out. Okay, and the chances of you writing a book on the media, I would love to see it, because there's, like I said, lots has changed since the book you mentioned and
Yeah.
Conventional media and that.
I'll chew on it.
All right.
My conspiracy theory, filtration device book has to come out first.
Okay. All right, Kenneth, Royce, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jayan.